Hello guys and welcome to the Transparency. Let's get this party started. I'll wait till people get in chat love. Again, this is the Adnan Syed case and moving along. Hey, come here.
On the edge of the log, expecting to find a body real soon. I never saw one.
Hello there, Mod Squad. Welcome. Welcome. Hello, Tish. Again, just giving you guys a chance to get in chat, love. Teddy, you want to say hi? No, you don't want to say hi today. All right, how we doing out there? There she is. She's like, this is a great time for me. All right. It's a great time for Teddy, too.
Lincoln Park. I'm like, where is that? Do you even know where it is? Have you ever been there?
Went shopping with a friend of mine, an ex-friend of mine, Adnan.
You know, it was not abnormal for me to leave school to go do something and then come back.
This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from an inmate at a Maryland Correctional Facility.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial. One story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig.
All right, guys. Good afternoon. Good evening. My co-host here, Teddy. Teddy, say hi. All right, going to give you guys a second to get in chat here. We're going to start in 1 minute and 30 seconds. Nothing like puppy and true crime. There you go. Hi, little mod. Come here, baby. What's wrong? You just want to take your toy and go? You think that's how it works around here? Huh, what? He's my canine dog. She. Teddy is a transsexual dog. Teddy is a wild one. Say I heard you were a wild one. Ooh. Hi, Jackie. And let me just rock you, baby. All right, Teddy, ready? Ready? Be free. Be free. All right, I'm rocking my Aliquippa today. This is Sheldon's state championship shirt, so I figured I'd rock it for him here. I'll show y'all. There you go. Oopsies. I mean, it's old school as shit. So, hope you guys are doing well. All right. Are we ready to start? Okay, we're ready to start. This.
Remember how last time I ended by saying that the detectives had other leads in this case besides Mr. S., the guy who found Hayes' body? That they were also starting to look at Adnan? Well, the reason we know that is because of this memo.
The memo was dated 12 February 1999. It's from Detective Daryl Massey to Detective Greg McGillivray.
This memo he's talking about is regarding an anonymous call. That's Detective Ritz on the witness stand at trial. He's talking about how they got this anonymous call 3 days after Hayes' body was found. The call came in to Detective Massey, a Baltimore County cop. The caller must have had an accent of some kind because Massey's report describes him as an Asian male, 18 to 21 years old, though it's unclear whether Asian in this case means East Asian like Korean or South Asian like Pakistani. But anyway, a mystery caller says, look at the ex-boyfriend.
The caller further advised that the boyfriend has taken to the victim to Lincoln Park on past occasions for sexual encounter. Prior to concluding the phone interview, the caller further stated that the victim broke off their relationship with her boyfriend about a week before she was reported missing.
The caller hangs up. Then, a few minutes later, the same guy calls back and says, oh yeah, by the way.
This time, the caller remembered about a year ago, the suspect informed a friend of his, parentheses, Basser Ali, Asian male, 17, end of parentheses, if he ever hurt his girlfriend, he would drive her car into a lake.
This time, the caller mentions a friend of Adnan's, Basser Ali. Actually, the name of this friend is Yasser Ali. The caller says Yasser might know something. Hangs up again. The cops can't trace the call. It's out of range. 3 days after the anonymous call, the detectives go meet with Yasser Ali at a Pizza Hut. Yasser says, I didn't make that call. I don't know anything. Their notes from that conversation say, quote, if Adnan wanted to get rid of the car, where would he do so? Ali indicated somewhere in the woods, possibly in Centennial Lake or the Inner Harbor, unquote. No one has ever gotten to the bottom of who made this anonymous call. The cops didn't figure it out. Adnan's attorney didn't figure it out. I've tried to figure it out too. For a while, I couldn't let it go because it seemed to me that whoever made this call, he must be the key to the whole thing. But so far, I only have guesses that I can't responsibly say out loud. Anyway, the day after the Pizza Hut talk on February 16th, the detectives do some paperwork that will ultimately crack the whole case open for them. They get a subpoena for Adnan's cell phone records. The results of that subpoena include a list of all the calls dialed and received on Adnan's phone on January 13th, the day he disappeared. That list will become arguably the most important piece of paper among all the thousands in this case. It'll become their map, and they'll follow it, call by call by call, like footprints that end up at Adnan's front door. If you look at that call log from January 13th, there are 34 calls that day. Obviously, the first thing they have to do is figure out who all the phone numbers belong to, home, cell, and pager numbers. Once they do, they realize, wait a minute, one person was called 6 times that day, much more often than anyone else. That person is an 18-year-old girl named Jennifer Pusateri. Jen is not a friend of Adnan's. She's a friend of Jay's. Remember, Jay had Adnan's car that day and his new cell phone.
He says, Jen, you gotta swear you won't tell nobody what I'm about to tell you.
That's Jen talking to detectives about the night of January 13th.
And I was like, all right. He's like, but I gotta tell you. I gotta tell somebody. I can't, you know. And I was like, all right, what's up, dude? He's like, Adnan killed Hay. And that's when I was just like, whoa, what do you mean Adnan killed Hay? Why? What? How? When? Where? You know?
If you want to figure out this case with me, now is the time to start paying close attention, because we have arrived, along with the detectives, at the heart of the thing. This interview with Jen happens on February 27th, 1999. The day before, on the 26th, the cops had gone to find Jen at her house. They explained they'd like her to come downtown to talk. Jen is thoroughly wigged out. She says she can't right now. She's busy, maybe later. Then Jen and a friend go see Jay. He's at work at a video store. She tells Jay, "The police want to talk to me. What do I do?" At trial, Jen says, quote, "He told me to go down there and tell them what I knew. Tell them enough to keep me out of trouble. And tell them to go see Jay. Send them his way." So Jen goes downtown to see the cops later that night. And she lies to them. Says she doesn't know anything. I've seen the detective's notes from that interview, and they're remarkably uninteresting. But by the time she left that night, Jen thought it was possible she was about to get charged. At trial, she said the last thing Detective McGillivray said to her that night was, quote, "Everyone's a suspect and no one's a suspect." So the next day she goes back to the detectives. This time she's got reinforcements. She's got an attorney with her, plus her mom. They turn on a tape recorder. Who, what, where, when, why.
When you asked why, what did he say?
He said that Adnan said that he broke his heart.
Did he say anything else?
No.
When you asked him how, what did he say?
Said that he strangled her.
So Jen gives them a motive. Hay broke Adnan's heart. And a method. He strangled her, which of course they already knew. But then Jen's information gets a little muddier.
Did you ask him where it happened?
He told me, this is what he told me. Jay asked me what we should do. He said, "Do you think we should go to the police now and tell them right now?" And I said, "I don't know." I said, "What was your involvement? Were you involved?" And he said, "No." He said, "Adnan showed me her body and asked me if I would help her bury him, if I would help him bury her body." And I said, "Well, what did you do? Did you help him? Do you know where the body is?" "No, I just took him to someplace in the city and I dropped him off." Then I went down, picked him up from a different place in the city, and then I don't remember where he said they went. I said, "How did he do this? When was this done?" And
When you asked him
he didn't know when.
What did he say?
Yeah, he said that he strangled her in Best Buy parking lot.
Did he say?
But I don't know how he got to Best Buy parking lot or anything like that.
Jay has told her, "I saw the body in the trunk of a car. Adnan asked me to help bury her, but I didn't. I refused. I took him someplace and later picked him up someplace at some chick's house." And he tells her that all this went down at the Best Buy parking lot off Security Boulevard, about a mile from Woodlawn High School. Jay and Jen were close friends at this time, winter of '99, talking or hanging out almost every day. They'd known each other since elementary school, and they were in the same class at Woodlawn. They'd graduated the year before in '98. Now Jen was a freshman at UMBC, University of Maryland, Baltimore County. She was studying biochemistry. She was in a sorority. When Hay disappeared, Jen was on winter break. She was working part-time as a lifeguard. And Jay was also working. One of his jobs was at F&M, a discount store. Jen said on January 13th, she and Jay had been hanging out earlier in the afternoon at her house after she got home from work. Then Jen says Jay left her house sometime between 3:45 and 4:15. They'd planned to meet later that evening. But then Jen had gotten a message Jay was running late. He wanted her to pick him up in the parking lot of Westview Mall around 8 p.m. She goes there, and she sees them together. She sees Jay get out of Adnan's car. Adnan says hi to her. She says he seems to be acting normal. Jay gets in her car, and that's when he tells her about the murder. After they'd driven a little ways, Jay mentions shovels, the shovels Adnan had used to dig in the park to bury Hay, that they were Jay's shovels from his house.
Jay mentioned to me that he knew where Adnan dumped the shovel, or shovels. I don't know how many there were, but he mentioned to me that he knew that where Adnan put the shovels.
Jen tells them she drives Jay back to Westview Mall, to the dumpsters back there, so that Jay can retrieve the shovels and wipe the handles clean in case of fingerprints.
After that, Jay came back out of my car, and he was really shooken up. He was completely shooken up. He was like, "You have to take me to go see my girlfriend now."
The next day, Jen says she drove Jay to the F&M store, the same one where he worked, so that he could throw out the clothes and boots he was wearing the previous night. He pitched them into a dumpster behind the store. One of the cops points out, for a guy who's telling you he didn't kill anyone and didn't help dispose of a body, he sure is taking a lot of precautions. He clarifies, Jay wasn't along when the body was buried.
Jay wasn't along when the body was buried.
In my opinion, no. In my understanding,
He's
Jay...
throwing away all of his clothes and he's wiping fingerprints off the shovels and things of that nature.
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Well, it wasn't until today that I thought, I just don't think that Jay... I don't think that Jay would lie to me, first of all. And, I don't know. Unless Adnan paid Jay a good sum of money, I really don't see Jay helping him.
Finally, the cop asks, were Adnan and Jay best friends? And Jen says, oh no, more like casual acquaintances. Once the detectives talk to Jen, everything happens very fast. That same night, the detectives go get Jay at the video store where he works. It's actually a porn video store, which, come trial, Adnan's attorney will stress with relish at every opportunity. Anyway, the cops bring him down to homicide. By the time they turn on the tape recorder, it's 1:30 in the morning on February 28th.
I am willing to answer questions and do not want an attorney at this time. My decision to answer questions...
So they get Jay in the interview room, and initially he pulls a Jen. He tells them nothing, more or less. Says he'd walked to the mall that day, gotten his girlfriend a bracelet for her birthday, hung around with Jen's younger brother, talked to Adnan sometime in the afternoon. And then after 2 pages of notes like that, it says, all right, I come clean. At least that's what I think it says. The detective's handwriting is messy, so maybe it says, a bright I came down. In any case, around 20 minutes later, they start taping, and Jay tells them a whole different story, one that more or less matches Jen's. Except for one major difference, one major piece of information about this crime that the cops are still missing. They do not know where Hayes' car is. They've been looking all over the place for it. They can't find it. Now, Jay tells them he knows where it is.
During the interview prior to turning the tape on, you stated to Detective McGilvery and myself that you'd be willing to take us out and show us where the vehicle's parked.
No problem.
Are you still willing to do that?
Yes.
So that's huge for them. Jay will take them to the car. And he does. Once they're finished at headquarters, they all drive out in the middle of the night to where the car is parked, on a grassy hill behind some row houses off Edmondson Avenue. Within a few hours, they'll have a warrant for Adnan's arrest.
They said something like, we know what you and Jay did, or we talked to Jay. And I'm like, Jay, like, I had a look of puzzlement on my face, like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean, Jay?
Adnan, of course, says Jay's story isn't true. But he says he doesn't know why Jay would lie, either. He says when he first heard Ritz and McGillivray mention Jay's name in connection with his own arrest, he was just confused.
And the same guy, McGillivray, he kind of like snorted, like, you know what we're talking about. No, I mean, I had no idea. And the reaction that he gave me was like, stop playing dumb.
It's not like there was some secret feud between Jay and Adnan, at least not that I know of. There was no drug deal gone wrong, neither had badmouthed the other or stolen the other's girlfriend. To hear Adnan tell it, it sounds like they didn't even know each other very well. When I first asked him what their friendship was like, what Jay was like as a person, Adnan really had to reach. He was like, Jay worked. He wasn't that into sports.
I knew he generally kind of listened to, like, I don't want to say white people music, but he like listened to like rock and roll, things like that, like heavy metal. I guess, you know, I can't really, I can't, to be honest with you, I couldn't even really recall like a huge long conversation that we ever had other than like a specific subject. If you was asking me something about Stephanie or something like where we were going to go or like we're hanging out, we wouldn't necessarily like, you know, be kicking it per se, right?
We wouldn't necessarily be kicking it per se, as Adnan speak for, yes, we smoked weed together, but we weren't close. However, Adnan was close with Stephanie, Jay's girlfriend, very close. And Adnan says that's the only thing he can think of now that might have turned Jay against him. Stephanie was smart, she was a top athlete at the school, she was beautiful by any standard, she looked like a model. She came from a family of achievers who did not approve of Jay, but had no problem with Adnan. So maybe Stephanie's relationship with Adnan, how affectionate they were with each other, the constant talking on the phone, the prom prince and princess stuff, maybe that was gnawing at Jay.
I don't know, I think it maybe Christina said it or someone said it.
Christina was Adnan's lawyer.
Like, when I was talking about how close I was with Stephanie, and they were like, and you never, like, looked at me like I was an idiot. Like, and you never thought that this bothered Jay. I was like, no, I never, my relationship with her was like this friend. So that was kind of like an aha moment where I was like, huh. So then it kind of like, now I'm thinking about all the things, that took place between us. It just kind of like started to make a little bit sense. Like maybe he was, mad at me. Because I always in my mind, like, man, why would he do this to me?
Adnan says he didn't feel betrayed by Jay exactly, because again, they weren't good enough friends for betrayal. He says it was more a feeling of injustice.
So, but with Jay, it was more so kind of like, I don't know, in my mind, I was kind of like, maybe the police were putting him up to this. Maybe somehow he got caught up. For a minute, I thought maybe he tried to claim the reward money and he got caught up in the situation. So, in my heart, I kind of like, I don't know. And there's a part of me that I don't want to make an accusation against someone else with, like, not being sure of it because, obviously it's happened to me.
A year after Adnan was arrested and the case came to trial, Jay walked up to the witness stand, and there was a moment when Adnan muttered something to him. He says he couldn't help himself. The judge called the attorneys up to the bench. Quote, I was just informed by my sheriff that the defendant made a comment to the witness as the witness approached the stand, indicating that he was pathetic, the judge said. I want to advise Mr. Syed that up until now he has been perfect. Don't spoil it. In the first taped interview, the detectives asked Jay, why would Adnan turn to someone he didn't even know all that well to help him with this murder?
Jay, why would Adnan call you?
The criminal element of Woodlawn.
I'm the criminal element of Woodlawn, he says.
Is that a real or perceived reputation?
I quote, perceived is like how a student body sees. Teachers who really know me know that I'm not like that, but, get certain reputation kind of sticks with you.
Because of the contacts you have with helping him get his marijuana, he thinks that you're in that element that you'd be willing to assist him in disposing of the body.
I would guess so. That I would know someone or know where or something. But,
In her closing argument at trial, prosecutor Casey Murphy posed this why him question to the jury about Jay. Think about it, she said. Do you really believe that the defendant, meaning Adnan, could go to one of his upstanding magnet school honor student friends or a friend from the mosque to assist him with this act? Of course not. He needed someone who behaved a little more dangerously than those people. He needed someone who took risks. The defendant hopes that you will look at Jay and say, I don't believe him. That is why the defendant chose Jay, because if something went wrong, the defendant could point the finger at Jay. This is what Jay is more or less trying to communicate to the cops. But they ask him, if you're actually not the type of guy who knows where to bury a body, then why did you help? Why didn't you go to the police instead?
he gives you his car keys. He gives you his cell phone. He tells you a time that he's going to call you, that he's going to kill her. And you do absolutely nothing. Help me understand your train of thought of why you do absolutely nothing at that point. Adnan knows a lot of things about me, like to affect the criminal activities. So, I mean, it wasn't... You're selling marijuana. So if I go to the cops and say, hey, this guy's going to kill her, they'll say, well, no, I'm not. He's crazy. But there's this drug dealer, and this is where he gets his shit from, and this is who he deals with, and he's got a rap sheet this long, and go get his ass.
Well, you've never been arrested, but one time. See,
one time.
You don't really have a rap sheet.
On the records one time, but I got my ass kicked plenty of times more than that one arrest. Plenty of times. Dogs sicked on me, frisked down in front of my own house with fucking gun points, helicopters and shit with my keys in my hand. You know what I mean? It's not just, you know, I mean, seriously, man, I've been coming home, people whipped out guns, made me lay in the street in the snow, walking in my own house, just so they can say I was the wrong dude, you know what I mean?
These are police that do that?
Yes.
So you didn't trust any police?
words of let's call the cops. That never crosses my mind. I could be getting shot at and I wouldn't be, let's call the cops.
Okay, they say. So if you didn't want to go to the police yourself, how about making an anonymous call then? You could have done it right after he shows you the body, as you're leaving the Best Buy parking lot.
You're driving off the parking lot. Why don't you stop your car and say, call the police, say, someone has just committed a murder. There's a body in the trunk of the car.
I just fear, man. You don't understand, like how it is.
Who are you afraid of? If you make an anonymous phone call, you could give a description of her car. You give them the tag number of the car.
Can we stop for a second?
Yes.
Can you stop that?
Well, if you have any questions, you can ask me on tape.
I don't understand this line of questioning.
Well, I'm trying to understand why you go through all this.
At first it was just like shock, and then after that I was part of it, so I mean I couldn't just...
But I'm trying to understand, Jay, what he has over you or your involvement in this is beyond belief, other than you being afraid of the police. Either he has paid you something or...
Like I said, he knows I sold drugs. I mean, he could get me locked up for that. I mean, I'm sure if I ratted him out for killing Hay, that he wouldn't hesitate to turn me to selling drugs.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add to this?
I feel bad that, I come forward and do anything, but I feel bad. I mean, I feel like I could stop it somehow. Maybe if I'd pay more attention or, somebody. I just feel bad about it. That's all I got to say.
He says, I just feel bad about it. That's all I got to say. The cops have a struggle with Jay. I have a struggle with Jay. He's the biggest mystery of this whole case for me. The cops interview him at least 4 times that I know about. 2 of those are on tape. And Jay also tells this story at trial, not once but twice, because the first proceeding ended in a mistrial. So at least, say, 6 times he's told what happened. And each time, some details shift. Some of these discrepancies seem small to me and understandable, but some are significant and confounding. And that distance between where a certain detail starts and where it ends up, how far it slides and why it slides, I've spent untold hours trying to measure that distance, trying to weigh it, for clues as to what might actually be true. For example, this is from taped interview number 1. The cops are asking about what he and Adnan did that morning of the 13th.
You pick up, and where do you get from that point?
We headed towards Western Mall. We did a little shopping together.
Now, here's taped interview number 2 from March 15th, 2 weeks later.
And where did you go?
We went to Security Square Mall.
That's a different mall, Security Square Mall, a couple miles away. I put this one in the category of probably not a big deal, right? Maybe Jay misspoke when he said Westview initially. And there are a bunch of little things like this. For example, when they're driving around that afternoon after they've ditched Hayes' car at the I-70 park and ride. At the first trial, Jay says they both got high in Adnan's car. At the second trial, he says only he smoked. Adnan didn't want to. Then there are more significant changes, but still you can chalk them up to Jay trying to protect his friends, or trying to protect himself. In the first taped interview, Jay says they're grabbing some food at a restaurant when Officer Adcock calls Adnan asking if he's seen Hay. The next time he tells it, he says that when that call comes, they're at a friend's apartment, a friend whose father happens to be a homicide detective in another county. Jay tells the cops he'd actually been to her house 3 different times that day, but he didn't want to get her in trouble. In the first taped statement, Jay says he refused to help dig a grave for Hay. 2 weeks later, he says they both dug the hole. But then there are other changes, bigger changes, where it's harder to judge why the details shift. This one, for instance. In the first taped interview, Jay says Adnan only told him that same day that he was going to kill Hay. 2 weeks later, Jay says that Adnan had started talking about it beforehand, 4 or 5 days before.
I think I'm going to kill her. Yeah, he says that a lot. Well, I conversated with him several occasions. He said that.
And he says Adnan enlisted his help with the murder on the 12th, the night before Hay disappeared. In this version, Jay tells Jen about it in advance, too. But by the time Jay testifies at trial, he goes back to the first version again, that he knew nothing until the day of, and that he didn't really take it seriously. There's so many more of these. There's a whole side trip Adnan and Jay supposedly take that afternoon after Hay's been killed to smoke some weed in Patapsco State Park. That trip disappears by trial, just drops out of the narrative. And Jay's whereabouts in between the time he drops Adnan back at school at midday and when he meets back up with him later that afternoon, the stories about where he is are so messy and so confusing that I can't even keep the different versions straight. But none of these discrepancies gives me, or I think the cops, as much pause as this next one. This is the mother of what the cops call Jay's inconsistencies. It's about where Adnan first showed him Hay's body in the trunk of a car. Here's from taped interview number 1. Jay says Adnan called him about 3:45 p.m. saying, "Come pick me up."
I went to pick him up from off of Emerson Avenue at a strip, and he pops the trunk open. And
You say on Edmondson Avenue off of the strip. Do you recall any cross streets on Edmondson Avenue where you go to meet him?
I don't know him by name, but I can tell him to you by sight.
A strip is a small outdoor drug market, just like a block where you can buy drugs. Jay tells the cops that it takes him about 15 or 20 minutes to get to the location on Edmondson. And later, when the cops drive out with Jay to get Hay's car, Jay shows them this spot on Edmondson Avenue. It's just a few blocks from where they ditched Hay's car, he said. Now, listen to what he says on March 15th.
And while en route to your house,
Yes.
you received a phone call from Adnan.
Yes.
On his cell phone.
Yes.
Which is in your possession.
Yes.
And the conversation was what?
That bitch is dead. Come and get me. I'm at Best Buy.
Best Buy, just like Jen had originally told them. This is a problem for the cops, this change, because it's not something you forget, where you were when you saw a dead body in the trunk of a car. It's not a slip of the tongue. And it's not clear what the calculation is. Edmondson Avenue versus the Best Buy parking lot. What's the advantage of one place over the other? Why tell this lie? Maybe he's just saying it because it matches Jen's story. Or did he lie to Jen in the first place and then forget? I have a friend who's worked for a long time in the Baltimore judicial system. She knows a lot of cops. And she reminded me when I was telling her about this case, cops are the most skeptical people in the world. They pretty much assume everyone is lying to them all the time. Ritz and McGillivray aren't newbies. McGillivray came from a law enforcement family. His father had been captain of the homicide unit, in fact. And Ritz was known in the department and in the state's attorney's office as a skilled and meticulous investigator. So they're not suckers. They're taking careful note of the changes in Jay's stories. It's why they keep going back to him, to clear up the inconsistencies. In the second taped interview, McGillivray confronts Jay, ticking off a list of the main things he's lied to them about. And Jay admits to all the lies. But even so, what struck me is that they don't really press him on any of it. The most forceful McGillivray gets is in this exchange about the location of the trunk pop.
He actually killed her
Yes.
at Best Buy,
To my knowledge.
to your knowledge.
Yes.
You weren't present for that.
No, sir.
Why did you lie about the location?
I figured there was cameras there, or somebody had spotted him doing what he was doing.
But if you actually didn't assist
But
in
I'm
her
associated.
murder,
I'm associated with him
why would you lie about?
because I'm
The
associated.
location.
I'm associated with him.
But you did lie.
Yes.
Okay.
Jay is saying, I figured there were security cameras at Best Buy, so that's why I lied, because I didn't want to be associated with it. What is he talking about? This is nonsensical. When he told the Edmondson Avenue version, he was already deeply associated with it. And if there were cameras at Best Buy parking lot, wouldn't that help his story? If they showed Hay's car, or Adnan walking around, or putting Hay's body in the trunk? But McGillivray lets it go, moves on to another point. And just so you know, as best as we can tell from workers at the store and from the former landlord, there probably weren't security cameras in the Best Buy parking lot back in 1999. And there's certainly no mention of any security footage in the police reports. At the end of both of Jay's tape statements, the detectives kind of come out with it. Are you telling us the truth right now? On February 28th, after Jay has told them off tape that he doesn't know anything about the murder, Ritz points out, your story has completely changed since you first came in this room.
All the information that you provided during this interview, has it been the complete truth?
To the best of my knowledge.
And then Jay reinforces it.
All right, I believe that concludes this interview. At this
I've
point,
been as honest as I possibly can remember to you. I mean, truthfully honest.
okay.
But of course, 2 weeks later, big swaths of his story have changed. So McGillivray asks him again on March 15th.
The tape interview that you've given us right now, is that the truth?
To the best that I can possibly humanly at this point in time remember, that is the truth.
Did you kill Haley?
No, sir, I did not.
Were you there when Adnan killed Haley?
No, sir, I was not.
I put it to Bill Ritz when I talked to him briefly on the phone. Jay's story kept changing. You were catching the inconsistencies, and he was having to explain them and clean up his story. So what ultimately made you believe him? Ritz said they believed Jay's story because, quote, we were able to investigate and corroborate what he was saying, unquote. So how exactly did they corroborate it? Next time on Serial.
All right. Hello to all the live chatters. Now, this is hello there, Desired Mod Squad. Hopefully you're doing well. Now, this episode here is the route talk. And this is where Sarah does, a reenactment of how long it's going to take to get to A, B, C, D, E, all that stuff. So...
This podcast is terms apply. See the DisneyBundle.com for details.
Jay, why would Adnan call you?
I'm a criminal element of Woodlawn.
Previously on Serial.
They said something like, we know what you and Jay did, or we talked today. And I'm like, Jay, like, what do you mean?
I'm sure if I ratted him out for killing Hay, that he wouldn't hesitate to turn me over for selling drugs.
I'm like, I don't know. Unless Adnan paid Jay a good sum of money, I really don't see Jay helping him.
This is a Global Tel-Link prepaid call from
Adnan Syed,
an inmate at a Maryland Correctional Facility.
From This American Life and WBEZ Chicago, it's Serial. One story told week by week. I'm Sarah Koenig. The first letter I got from Adnan Syed, almost exactly 1 year ago, included a challenge. He was writing about the prosecution's timeline of the crime, about when and where Hae Min Lee was killed. The state contended that Hae was killed between 2:15 and 2:36 p.m. at the Best Buy parking lot about a mile from Woodlawn High School. That's a 21-minute window in which to commit the murder, which may seem like a long time, Adnan wrote, but it is virtually impossible if you consider the following facts, which he then listed. For example, when the final bell rings at 2:15, you can't just leave and jump in your car, he wrote. Quote, there are 1,500 other students filling the hallways and stairwells of a 4-story building, unquote. Then you have to get out of the school parking lot, but the parking lot is encircled by the school bus loop, so you can't get your car out until the buses fill up and leave, which Adnan wrote took about 10 to 15 minutes.
I'm telling you, I wish, maybe I'll try to draw a picture of it, but if you could just see how Woodlawn High School lets out at 2:15.
That's Adnan elaborating on his letter.
You can't just go to your car and then leave. It's going to take a few minutes. So it's a really tight, really window of time, for this to have taken place, right? And I've always, in my heart, man, I've always kind of I've seen it on TV before, on Dateline or Nightline, where someone tries to reenact the crime. And there's a moment where, there's someone you know what, this crime could not have been committed according to these set of facts. There's always this moment, right? It's I visualize, because the route, it's just, I don't know. Oh, hey, we're getting ready to go, right? Sorry. Hey, I gotta go. All right, bye.
Okay, bye. That happens sometimes. The guards come by and you're just done mid-sentence. Anyway, I can pick up from Adnan's letter. He wrote that in addition, the route to the Best Buy, even though it's close to the school, there are major intersections along the way, and that there is, quote, a ton of traffic at that time, unquote. And then the murder itself. How would he be able to strangle Hay, a tall, strong, athletic girl, quote, remove her body from the car, carry it to the trunk, and place her in there in broad daylight at 2:30 in the afternoon? And then I walk into the Best Buy lobby and call Jay and tell him to come meet me there? All in 21 minutes. I am 100% sure that if someone tried to do it, it would be impossible, unquote. Gauntlet so thrown, producer Dana Chivis and I gave it a shot. We tried this drive. Twice we tried, in fact, because, full disclosure, the first time we screwed it up. The second time, though, we were like a machine. So here we go. We're at Woodlawn High School, Wednesday afternoon, after school announcements.
If you are a senior and you want to apply for local scholarship, you need to go to the counseling office.
Okay, then last bell. More than 1,000 students fill the halls, just like Adnan describes in his letter. We figure Hay gets in her car quickly. She's in a hurry. Okay. It's now 2:17. The bell rang at exactly 2:15. Say the fastest she could have gotten to her car is 2 minutes. So that's giving the state the benefit of the doubt, right? If she's really hustling, maybe she can't get to her car in, say, 2 minutes. Remember, her friend Debbie Warren said Hay had told her right after school that she was in a rush to see her new boyfriend Don at the mall, presumably the Owings Mills Mall where they both worked. I think this is the last bus. Okay. We do indeed have to wait for the bus loop to clear. It takes a few minutes. We just have to sit there. We're timing. We're in the back of the school. Now we have to drive up around to the front of the school, up around the circle near the gym. Remember, that's where Inez Butler Hendricks says she sees Hay, who'd come to grab a snack. Once we get there, we're at 11 minutes, 38 seconds. Okay, I'm going to run in, keep timing. I run into the gym area where the food cart was, run back out to the car. Then we have to drive back out to Woodlawn Drive, turn onto Security Boulevard, which does have some big intersections you have to get through. Again, we're trying to get to Best Buy, it's still there today, in 21 minutes. We're at 17 minutes, right about now. We're at 17 minutes, we're just crossing under the Beltway. Less than a minute later, oh yeah, see, there's the sign. Best Buy. Jay's story was that when he pulled into Best Buy, he saw Adnan at the phone booth there at the edge of the building, wearing red gloves. Adnan motioned for Jay to follow him across the front of the building, around to the other side, to the farthest corner of a side parking lot, where Jay saw Hay's car parked. This particular part of the parking lot, alas, it has significance. After Adnan was arrested, the detectives interviewed another friend of his, a kid named Jawan. And Jawan told them he'd gotten high with Adnan once, in Adnan's car. Here's tape of that interview.
And where was this?
Best Buy parking lot.
Why did you go to Best Buy Parsons?
Nobody would be over there.
Was it your choice to go there? His choice.
He said that's where him and Hay to go to spend time together.
Adnan and Hay would go there to spend time.
Did he say what they would do there when they were in the parking lot?
said it in hindsight.
In case you didn't hear that, he says, I think he might have said that they had sex there before. Yeah. Juwan said this trip to get high at Best Buy, that it happened after Hay went missing. Meaning, if Adnan did it, he was taking Juwan back to the exact spot where he killed Hay. He was returning to the scene of the crime. Juwan says that they parked, from the sounds of it, right where Jay says Hay's car was that day. Right where Dana and I are now also parked. It takes Dana and me 18 minutes to get to this spot. That leaves 3 minutes for the actual horror of the thing. An argument maybe, then strangulation. Then he's got to put her body in the trunk, somehow without anyone seeing. Granted, this part of the parking lot is pretty empty, but it's a parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. There are definitely cars and people near enough to make this seem like a very, very risky move. Dana and I time it out, counting down the quickest possible imagining of such a thing. Manual strangulation usually takes a few minutes. Then we get out of our car and walk over to where we think the payphone was, according to a sketch Jay made for the cops. There's no phone booth there now. I just want to pause here and talk about this phone booth for a minute. Weirdly, we have not been able to confirm its existence. The Best Buy employees I talked to did not remember a payphone back then. We spoke to the landlord at the time and to the property manager. They had no record of a payphone. They dug up a photo of the store from 2001. No phone booth or payphone, though lots of public phones did come down between 1999 and 2001. They looked up the blueprints for the store when it was built in 1995. Nothing. The manager also said there is no record of a service agreement between Best Buy and any payphone company at that store. We checked with the Maryland Public Service Commission. We checked with Verizon. Neither could track down records from that far back. It seems crazy to me that the cops would have either not checked to make sure it existed or failed to mention it if somehow it wasn't there. They never got the call record from this booth. There's nothing in their files about it. At trial, Adnan's lawyer brings up this phone booth when she's trying to attack Jay's credibility. She says to the judge, quote, "We believe that the physical description of the actuality of Best Buy, including the location of the phone booth at Best Buy, the entrance, the existence or non-existence of security cameras, etc." She goes on. So, I don't know. We're stumped on this one. But let's assume it did exist that day. The prosecutors said they knew Hay was dead by 2:36 because there's a call at 2:36 to Adnan's cell phone, which Jay has. And they say that must be the call Jay told the cops about. The one where Adnan calls his own phone and says, "Come and get me, I'm at Best Buy." You can see it on the call log. It just says incoming. There's no phone number attached to incoming calls. This 2:36 call was 5 seconds long. We get out a quarter, we put it in.
Dial the number.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Stop it. 22 and a half minutes?
Yeah.
So wait, let's just be precise about it.
21, it's
22 minutes and 2 seconds.
Yeah.
We just did it in 22 minutes and 2 seconds, and that was leaving about a minute and a half in the car for the actual killing part.
Should probably be the minimum amount of time in the car.
Right. I don't know.
I mean, it seems like, yeah, it could be done, but it seems far-fetched.
It does seem far-fetched, because there's no room for any errors, any pauses even. The buses, the drive, the strangulation, the moving of the body, the call, they all have to happen as quickly as they possibly can for the 2:36 call to work. But it is possible, or at least not impossible, which is what Adnan was saying in that first letter.
So you guys,
Yeah.
So,
When I told Adnan, Dana and I more or less did it in the time allowed, the 21 minutes, his overall reaction was incredulity.
Seems like 5 minutes. From what I can remember, those buses didn't clear in 5 minutes, because I remember sometimes we would have to wait in that parking lot for the buses to clear. I don't know. I just, to me, that's always what stuck in my mind was the buses. You have to wait for the buses. So, I don't know. It's kind of disheartening, but I just always, I don't know how long the crime would have taken. I don't know how long. I mean, it's pretty I don't know. I mean, if you guys said you did it, then you did it. But I don't know. I don't know what to say to that. I don't know what to say. I've just always thought in my mind, man, that
I mean, look, this is what I'll say. It doesn't make me think. To me, it doesn't prove anything except that it's possible. It doesn't mean that I think you're lying or that I think it even happened at the Best Buy. I'm just saying, if you're going to debunk the state's timeline.
No, I understand.
Like we weren't able. Yeah, we weren't able to do that. We weren't able to debunk their timeline.
I understand that. Yeah, I understand that.
However, Dana and I were not done because, of course, this is just step one of the state's timeline. In the detective's notes, Dana and I found a handwritten itinerary dated March 18th, 1999. So that's 3 days after Jay's second taped interview with police. This is the route Jay laid out for the cops, his entire driving day on January 13th. This is what we're going to try to replicate to see if it matches the call record from that day. Because, right, the prosecution's story of the crime was mainly pinned to two things: Jay's statements and the cell records. Adnan remembers that at his trial, the prosecution had a big blow-up chart of the call record, the one listing 34 calls made and received on Adnan's cell phone that day, with blanks beside each call. Every time a witness identified a call on the list, the prosecutor would label it with a sticker.
So at 321, they would have placed a sticker, boom, called a Jen Pusateri. It was a pretty powerful thing because as he was testifying, it was almost as if they were using the cell phone records as a proof for all of his testimony. Okay, you said what happened at this time, and such call was made, boom. It was very, I would say, influential.
Besides the calls themselves, they also had a list of all the cell towers that pinged each time a particular call came in or went out. Sure, the prosecutor said, you might have your doubts about Jay, but the call record doesn't lie. Jay couldn't possibly have known which towers were getting pinged when. He couldn't fabricate that. It would be too crazy of a coincidence. So the cell towers and the calls and Jay's story, the way they all meshed, the prosecutors argued, was irrefutable. Prosecutor Casey Murphy said to the jury in her closing statement, quote, "The most important thing for you to remember about Jay's testimony is that it does not stand alone. It is corroborated." She added, "The cell phone records support what those witnesses say, and the witnesses support what those cell phone records say. There's no way around it."
All right, ready?
Yep.
Okay. So I started it's 2:51, and we're making a right out of the Best Buy parking lot onto Belmont Ave.
All right, so let's see if we can recreate what Jay says happened that day. The next stop after Best Buy is the I-70 park and ride, where Jay says they leave Hayes' car for a few hours. It's just a large commuter parking lot. Jay says he follows Adnan there. Adnan is driving Hayes' car. Jay has Adnan's car. He's pretty careful to let the cops know. He wasn't ever in Hayes' car, never touched her or her stuff.
Did he get out of the car? Yes, he got out of the car and...
This is from Jay's second taped statement.
Proceeded to go through the trunk and the back seat.
This detail has always struck me, by the way. Jay says Adnan is going through the trunk of Hayes' car at the I-70 park and ride. Hayes' body is back there, in the trunk at this point. But anyway.
Several items he picked up and moved around and stuff like that. And then he came over to his car, told me to pop the trunk. I popped the trunk. He placed a whole bunch of items in the trunk. And then he got in the driver's seat, and we switched places, and I got in the passenger seat.
It takes Dana and me 11 minutes to get to the park and ride from Best Buy. Then we wait a couple minutes to account for Adnan's movements. In case you're wondering, there were no security cameras at this park and ride back in '99. We checked with the DOT. So now it's a little after 3 p.m. When Jay took the cops on this ride on March 18th to map out the timeline, he told them that after they left the park and ride, they went in search of weed. He says that's when he calls his friend Patrick. And this is where things start to get off course. There is indeed a call to Patrick on the call log, but it's at 3:59 p.m. So right away, we've got a time problem. By trial, though, Jay has sorted that out, so his story better match the call log. He testified that he'd called Jen Pusateri first at 3:21 to find out if Patrick was home. Jen testified that no, Jay would not have called her to find out where Patrick was. It's just not a thing that would have happened. But in any case, there is a call to Jen at 3:21. Jay says when they didn't find Patrick at home, they switched course and headed up to Forest Park to buy weed. Dana and I drive that same route.
Okay, so they buy 2 dimes of weed here. That's a side note.
All right. Done.
Done. We are making a left.
Jay also mentions another call around this time. This call is incredibly important, and I will talk more about it in another episode, I swear. But for right now, what you need to know is, in his second interview, when the cops show him the list of calls, Jay says Adnan spoke to some girl in Silver Spring. Her name was Nisha. It's that girl Adnan had been flirting with. And Adnan briefly put Jay on the phone with her. And the reason this is so important is for 2 reasons. One, it's the only call in this stretch of time that's to someone Adnan knew, rather than a friend of Jay's. And it puts Jay and Adnan together in the middle of the afternoon, when Adnan says he was not with Jay, he was back at school. In the March 18th itinerary, there's a note about the Nisha call, that Adnan handed the phone to Jay at the golf course on West Forest Park Avenue.
Yeah, that is the golf course. Okay.
If indeed this is the golf course he's saying where suspect hands the phone to the witness, who's Jay, that was the Nisha call. And that does happen right now. So the time works for this one. It matches Jay's story. But here's the problem. It doesn't match the cell tower in the call records. It's pinging a tower back near the Best Buy, west of where we are. And that is true of all these calls from the middle of the afternoon. The 3:21 to Jen, 3:32 to Nisha, 3:48 to a dude named Phil, 3:59 to Patrick. None of these calls pinged a tower near where Jay tells the cops they were driving that afternoon. Not a one. At trial, though, even though all these mid-afternoon calls were identified and accounted for in Jay's testimony, prosecutors did not point out that the cell towers didn't match. Adnan's defense attorney did, sort of, but reading the trial transcript, even though she notes the discrepancy, she doesn't nail it, so it's hard to tell what that discrepancy means. So, onward.
So we are headed to Patapsco State Park right now.
Oh, you're kidding?
Not kidding. We definitely don't have time to go to Patapsco.
Well, let's see how long that takes. This is the next stop on the itinerary, to a place known as the Cliffs at Patapsco State Park, which is a good 20-minute drive from where we are right now. Adnan's track practice starts at 4 p.m. If before we were sort of clinging respectably to the agreed-upon timeline, now we're about to just thumb our noses at the thing. Yeah, I mean, this just seems absurd. It's between 3:45 and 3:50 now in their world. And if I'm Adnan and I need to be seen for track, I'm freaking out right now that I need to get back for track.
Yeah.
To have an alibi. Right. So what's this like, let's just drive halfway across the county to go to a state park to smoke a blunt. Like, just pull up, just smoke in your car. And I don't know, it just seems like there had to be other places you could have just pulled over for a quick smoke, if indeed that's what needed to happen.
There's a shrimp sale at the Crab Crib.
Sometimes I think Dana isn't listening to me. Anyway, we head to Patapsco State Park because Jay is very clear. Tape statement number 1, tape statement number 2, March 18th itinerary. Now is when they go smoke a blunt at the Cliffs in Patapsco. Dana and I trek in there. Okay, down many rough-hewn steps. This is beautiful. You can see the river below, some train tracks, hills. Jay's memories about this spot are specific. Dana reads from the handwritten notes from March 18th.
So these are the detective's notes. It says Patapsco Valley State Park, 16:30 hour. And then the next note is sun getting ready to hit mountain tops.
16:30 hour means 4:30 p.m. Sunset that day was at 5:05 p.m., so that would make sense.
And then it says, I can't believe I did it. I'm sad, but not really.
Here's what Jay says they talked about. And before I play this next tape, just a warning that is disturbing.
We're standing overlooking a whole bunch of stuff at this cliff, and he starts telling me about how it was when he killed her, how he said he wrapped his hands around her and her throat, and she started kicking, and he said he looked up to make sure nobody was looking in the car at him, and he said he was worried about her scratching him, getting his skin underneath her fingernails. And that she was trying to say something. He says that she thinks that she was trying to say that she was sorry, but that's what she deserved. And
How long do you think you were at the cliff?
20 minutes to a half an hour.
Other than that conversation, was there anything additional?
He had said to me he wondered where he was going to put the body at.
Did you make any suggestions?
None at all.
Did he name any locations?
None at all.
He didn't say, what about here? He didn't name off the half dozen locations and you gave him thumbs up or thumbs down?
I just, he said something to me, to the effect of the state park where we were, a little bit up the river, but I told him that people walk up and down there.
So Jay says they talk about the murder at the cliffs. He says they talk about whether to dispose of the body right there in Patapsco State Park. He says they're there for 20 minutes to half an hour. Come trial, when Jay's on the stand talking about where they went that day, this whole trip to Patapsco, it never happens. It's just not there. That talk they have, instead, it happens in Adnan's car when they're tooling around looking to buy weed. This is a puzzle to me. It's such a vivid scene Jay's describing. It's so detailed. I have to think he included it for a good reason. But it doesn't fit the timeline. Driving out of the park, talking to Dana, I was turning this over. Why the Patapsco story at all? Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Plus, it's like trying to, I'm trying to think of an analogy of what the uselessness of what we're trying to do by recreating something that doesn't fit. It's like like trying to plot, the coordinates of someone's dream or something, where it's just like, but wait, that doesn't, as if we're going to be surprised every single time, but it's like, but it doesn't, because it's not proper.
I think they call that a fool's errand.
At trial, Jay says Adnan gets another call as he's dropping Adnan off at school for track. Quote, before he left the car, he received a phone call or placed a phone call. It was in Arabic. I don't know who he was talking to. I don't know what it entailed. I believe it was his mother, unquote. Adnan and his family say he doesn't speak Arabic or Pashto or Urdu, but maybe Jay could hear a foreign-sounding accent on the other end of the call. And there is a 427 call in the log. Maybe that's the one. But again, the cell tower it pings isn't near Woodlawn High School. The earliest Dana and I can get from the cliffs back to Woodlawn is 4:45 p.m., and that's being generous. But even so, that means if Adnan still had to get changed, he is very late for 4 p.m. track now, which seems like a bad strategy for an alibi, doesn't it, to be noticeably late like that? Jay says he goes next to a friend's house. I'm going to call this friend Kathy because she didn't want to be identified. Jay says he gets there by 5:20 or 5:30. He says he smokes some more weed there, but it's not long before Adnan calls him and says, I'm done with track, come get me. Jay goes back to Woodlawn to get Adnan. Jay tells the cops that he gets to Woodlawn at about 6 p.m. and that he sees Adnan with a friend from track. The notes from March 18th say, said goodbye to track buddy, Will.
That day, he said, bye to Will, and then, oh, man.
That is Will from track.
It's hard to remember that one interaction.
You mean I should have asked you 15 years ago?
Maybe 5. I would have remembered. Oh, man, that's hard to remember. Gee whiz, I didn't even know that I was a part of anything until you just told me that. No one ever contacted me about anything.
Really?
Yeah, yeah.
So the no cops ever called you and said, was Adnan at track that day? No attorneys, no attorneys ever called and said, was Adnan present at track practice that day?
I don't remember any of that.
We'll confirm that, yes, track started at 4. So you had quite a bit of time from the end of school at 2:15.
Yeah, go, dig around, play footsie with your little girlfriend, and then go get ready for practice and be ready and on time. Mm-hmm. It was never an excuse to be late for track practice.
Because there was so much time.
Exactly.
And what would happen if you were really late or you skipped, or was there any consequence?
Yeah, run extra. If you didn't have a family emergency or something, you had to run extra.
Okay.
400. Extra running the next day. Yep.
Their coach, Michael Syed, told the cops that Adnan probably was there that day, that he thinks he'd have noticed if Adnan wasn't there, but he couldn't be 100% sure. The other thing Will told me was that he saw Jay pick up and also drop off Adnan for track multiple times.
Yeah, that was just normal. Like, normal to the point where no one would pay attention to it.
Right. So you can't solve this crime for us.
I wish I could. Oh, my goodness.
Here's another problem with the track story. Jay says he gets Adnan at about 6. There's an outgoing call at 5:38 p.m. to Adnan's friend Krista, someone Jay would not be calling, which would suggest Adnan had his phone at 5:38 p.m. And the call pings a tower that's out near that guy Patrick's house, sort of near where they end up ditching Hayes' car, not at all close to Woodlawn High School. I could keep going here to the bitter end of the night, but I'm hoping you'll take my word for it that the timeline has some problems. I'm going to try very hard not to bore you right now, but I do want to talk about cell records for a sec, because I want to know whether the state used the call records accurately and fairly in Adnan's trial. Do the records really corroborate Jay's story? You might have seen some recent reports about how cell phone evidence isn't as reliable as it was once cracked up to be. The Washington Post ran a story in June, for instance, with the headline, "Experts say law enforcement's use of cell phone records can be inaccurate." Federal courts in Oregon and Illinois have ruled cell phone evidence inadmissible. The problems arise when you're trying to say, I can prove you were at such and such a place at such and such a time because of the cell tower that your phone pinged. You can't do that with certainty because of the way cell towers get activated and how much territory they cover. In fact, these kinds of records are mostly useful as a way to say where someone wasn't rather than where he or she was. Like, if a call pings a tower in downtown Baltimore, I'm going to be pretty confident that you're not making that call from, say, Annapolis or D.C. or Patapsco State Park. As far as I know, Adnan's case was the first in Maryland to use cell tower technology as evidence. It was a new thing. Because I am, technologically speaking, a moron, I asked Dana to find out. Did the cell expert who testified at trial present the technology accurately in a way that still holds up? So Dana sent this gripping testimony to 2 different engineering professors, one at Purdue and one at Stanford University. And they both said, yes, the way the science is explained in here is right. And the way that the state's expert, a guy named Abraham Woronowitz, tested these cell sites by just going around to different spots and dialing a number and noting the tower it pinged, that's legit. That is not junk science. But that's a different question from, does the science he's explaining here actually support the state's case? Did the prosecution deploy that science fairly? That's a more complicated question with a more complicated answer. Woronowitz, the cell expert, and prosecutor Casey Murphy did the site tests together. She took him around to various locations connected to Jay's story. Dana explained it to me.
They went to the spots that matter the most in the story of the crime.
Okay.
So places like Jen's house, the Best Buy, Leakin Park, where Hay was buried. Those places that are really important.
Okay.
Kathy's apartment. So they do 14 of those, right?
Okay.
They go out this day in October. They do 14 of them. Do you know how many they brought up at trial?
No.
They ask the cell phone expert about 4 of them.
You're kidding? Really?
4 of them.
4 of them. Because the rest of the tests didn't really help their argument, which is their prerogative. Their job is to put on the strongest possible case. But of the 4 site tests they do talk about, one is a test Woronowitz does in a place called Gelston Park, which I'm not even going to explain because it's basically irrelevant to our story. The other 3 places, these all happen in Jay's narrative after 6 p.m., after Jay had picked Adnan up from track.
Sort of from 12:07 until 6:07. That window of time is where kind of Jay's story doesn't line up with the cell phone records. And the timeline he's giving is also not lining up with the times of the cell phone calls.
So the towers, the times, and Jay's story are not matching anywhere in that basically 6-hour period.
Right. Yeah.
Which, this is sort of what Dana and I had experienced on our drive that day, that it wasn't plotting out. Just a word about the cell tower testimony. It took 2 days, and it was sort of a mess. Adnan's defense attorney, Christina Gutierrez, claims she didn't have all the cell record evidence, she didn't have the cell tower maps, she tries to get Waranowitz's testimony thrown out, the judge nearly agrees with her, then prosecutor Kevin Urich ends up asking for a mistrial, which isn't granted. And all this might sound like exciting courtroom fireworks, but I can't stress enough how tedious this must have been for the jury. And also possibly confusing. Warwanowitz is actually a young guy. On the stand, he looks kind of like George Stephanopoulos, except tired and fearful. Here's one of the more lively moments of his testimony. Prosecutor Kevin Urich talks first.
What, if any, effect does brands of cell phones have on the functioning of the AT&T wireless network?
Overruled, if you know.
It depends on the quality of the phone.
How might that affect it?
Objection. Overruled, and again, if you know.
Poor performance.
Yeah, how so?
Objection. This point I'm going to sustain, and Mr. Urich, unless you are prepared to lay a foundation for this...
Seriously, most of it is more boring than that, which is why I made Dana read it all, so I didn't have to. She explained that the cell site tests the prosecution did bring up at trial, the ones after 6 p.m. The first one was about a site near Kathy's apartment. Remember, that's the call Adnan gets at Kathy's when Officer Adcock calls asking if he's seen Hay. Moranowitz says that one worked. That 6:24 p.m. call is a winner. It matches the cell tower, it matches the call log, and it matches Jay's story, Adnan's story, and Kathy's story, too. It puts Jay and Adnan together at a certain place at a certain time. The question is, what happens after that? Jay says after the Adcock call, they left Kathy's, and that's when they went to bury Hay in Leakin Park. Then they ditched her car out off Edmondson Avenue, and then they headed back toward Westview Mall, where they threw evidence into the dumpsters. And if you map the cell towers that ping between 6:24 p.m. and, say, 8:05, if you imagine each tower lighting up, they do illuminate this trail. They support the locations in Jay's story. Warwanowitz confirms this with riveting testimony that sounds like this.
Yes.
The most incriminating stop on their route that night is, of course, Leakin Park. There were 2 incoming calls, one at 7:09 and one at 7:16, that hit a tower at the northwest end of the park. I asked Dana, since the range of that Leakin Park tower reaches beyond just the territory of the park, could they have been someplace else besides digging a grave in the actual park? Could you have been at someone's house or something?
It's possible you could have been here, this is, I think, Patrick's house, one of his addresses,
okay,
for instance. Or you could have been these are strips. Like, maybe you could have been there.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think they were probably in Leakin Park.
Okay.
Because it's just, I don't think, the amount of luck you would have to make up a story like that and then have the cell phone records corroborate those key points, I just don't think that's possible.
Isn't that sort of tantamount to saying, I think Jay's telling the truth?
I'm saying I think the cell phone was in Leakin Park.
Right. That looks pretty bad for Adnan. Because even though the cell towers can't say who was with the phone or who was making the call, Adnan himself says he's pretty sure he was with his phone at that time after track. Again, his memory is vague, full of I probably would'ves, but he says that from what he can remember of the evening, after he got the call from Officer Adcock, he remembers dropping Jay off at some point, and then he says he would have gone to the mosque for prayers. It was Ramadan. He doesn't say he lent his phone out or his car to Jay or anyone else that evening. So, according to Adnan, he was with the phone, and twice that night, the phone pinged the tower near Leakin Park. So, bad for Adnan. On the other hand, the call records also undermined what Jay tells the cops about that same trip to Leakin Park. The Adcock call at Kathy's ends at about 6:29 p.m. The Leakin Park calls are 40 minutes later. But Jay says after the Adcock call, he and Adnan left Kathy's, and then they do a bunch of different things. They drive to Jay's house for shovels, then to I-70 park and ride for Hayes' car. Then Jay goes to McDonald's back by school to wait for Adnan, says he's there waiting for about 20 minutes. Then they drive all around for a while, back over to Patapsco, then up Dogwood to security, before they finally get to Leakin Park. All that, what I just described, that takes an hour and 20 minutes. Twice as long, in other words, than the call log accounts for. I'm not trying to be petty here. I don't think we should hold Jay to some crystal clear timeline. How could he possibly remember each twist and turn and phone call from that day 6 weeks later? However, if the state is saying Adnan Syed is guilty because we have this witness and his story is backed up by cell records, well, what I see is you have this witness, but his story has shifted rather significantly over time. And you have these call records, but I don't think they're as ironclad as you're making them out to be. Because for the most part, they don't exactly align with your witness's narrative. There are key moments when they do support his version of that night. But what about the rest of the day?
You know, it's like, it's so unfair to me because it's like, it never the etched in stoneness of the phone records. It never goes in my way. It's just whenever it's proven what the prosecutor said. It's like, you know, the Moses tablet. Whenever it's something I'm saying, it's like the Holy Grail. Oh, we don't know where it is. We're not sure if it really exists. It kind of floats away. But that's not cool though, because now what you're saying is that you can use the cell phone records when it benefits me.
That was the 30-minute cutoff. Adnan called back.
Yeah, I got cut off mid-rant. But, yeah, no, but just to finish up real quick.
The rant went on. Of all the calls, the 236 call is the most troublesome to Adnan. It's the one he probably thinks about the most, because that's the call that starts the whole chain. And he also thinks about it because he says he has an alibi for that time, the Asia letters, where she says she saw him in the library. Here's a weird thing about the 236 call. The prosecutors are very clear at trial that this is the come and get me, I'm at Best Buy call. But they're not basing it on anyone's testimony. Jay never says the call was at that time. In fact, he says repeatedly that Adnan called him around 3:40 or 3:45. Jen also says that's about when Jay left her house that day. But there is no incoming call at or near 3:45 on the call log. So the prosecution has to go with 236 because it's the only one that sort of lines Jay's story up with the log. It's their only choice. When you tease apart the state's case, you can get tripped up on details like this, which is maybe why prosecutor Kevin Urich addressed this head on in his opening statement to the jury. He told them, look at the big picture. The main plot points in Jay's story have been consistent. He tells them that consistently Jay, quote, has always given the same story about what the defendant did where. Consistently, he tells Jennifer a consistent story. He tells police a consistent story about the defendant. He tells consistently the defendant's involvement, the defendant's actions on that day. He has never wavered on that point, unquote. That is a lot of consistentlys. And while maybe it's not great oratory, it does have the advantage of being true. In Jay's statements, while the particulars shifted, the spine of his story did not. Adnan told Jay he was going to do it. Adnan showed him the body. They buried her in Leakin Park. They ditched her car. Jay has been consistent on those points. It's funny, there's this part of the trial that keeps coming back to me. It's when Cristina Gutierrez is cross-examining Jay. She's pointing out that he lied to detectives about various things, including the location where he says Adnan showed him Hayes' body in the trunk of the car.
And what you told them in your act of showing them that place, those were lies, weren't they?
They were not true.
They weren't the truth. What's the opposite of the truth?
Objection.
Consisting. You told them something that was not the truth.
No, I told them the
backed
truth.
it.
I'm sorry.
And then you backed it up, showing them a place that was not true. Correct?
I told them the truth. I did not show them a location that was true. No.
I wasn't allowed to do that. Come here.
He says, I told them the truth. I did not show them a location that was true. As oxymoronic as that sounds, I think I see what he's saying. Yes, I told some lies, but I told the truth. Overall, I told the truth. There are parts of Jay's story that make no sense, where it seems like there must have been more going on than he's saying. But here's what's also the truth. You can say the same thing about Adnan's story, too. Next time on Serial.
All right. What do we think, guys? You guys want to see any pieces of exhibits? Ask any questions. Now's your chance. Adnan Syed, is he innocent or guilty? All right, because if you don't have any questions, comments, concerns, complaints, I am going to wrap this up so that you guys are continuing to get, again, this is the story with flashback, fast forward, all that good stuff. I want to thank all the mods, all the subscribers, lurkers, members, for being in chat, love. Until next time, you'll be able to find myself this evening over there on Allie Erickson's live that she has scheduled at 9 p.m. I hope to see some of you guys over there, and talk to you soon. Truth and Transparency, out.